I knew that I wouldn't. I feel good.
Prima Pediatrics Healthcare Hour on AM 1220 KHTS. Dr. Feldman is your host. I'm Kyle Jellings. And we have, we've been going through, we talked a little bit about your cycling coming up.
Yes.
And then that is a good habit to have. And we're actually going through some bad habits that parents do that can hurt the health of their kids. And it talks about, the article I read talked about parents as role models. And here's a few bad habits we talked about. First one we talked about was criticizing yourself. And now the bad habit number 2 is emotional eating.
Yes. And here's the interesting thing. Everybody does emotional eating. Everybody does that. And it's not in and of itself to have an occasional time where you have emotional eating is not terrible. It's if you do it on a consistent basis, where anytime you feel bad, you eat, or anytime you feel good, you eat. So that is your reward system, basically, instead of something else. Then what happens is you get very obese. You get fat, which makes your health go to heck of a handbasket.
Yeah.
And your kids will be fat. And a perfect example is a very close friend of mine who is actually going to a fat farm in another week because she's had it because she's diabetic and she can hardly walk and she's really in deep trouble. And for years we've been telling her about it. It was so bad at one point she had a bypass, but she managed to overeat through the bypass.
Wow.
So and she's an emotional eater. Everything is food, and her kids.
And when you say emotional eater, you mean if you're happy, you eat. If you're sad, you eat. Is that what that is? Because
yeah.
the when I think of emotional eater, I think of the romantic comedies where the girl gets broken up with and she gets a pint of ice cream because she's sad.
Right.
And she eats. But it's for every emotion, not just sadness.
Some people do it for every emotion.
Okay.
It's their reward system.
Gotcha. Okay.
I mean, and some of that was actually developmentally and anthropologically appropriate, because what would happen in the old days is that there would be times of feasts and times of famine, and when there were so many famines that whenever there was food around, people celebrated, rejoiced, and they ate.
Yeah.
And they ate to excess because they knew they would have to have some fat of the land to live off of when the famine hit.
Uh-huh.
And that was a reality. So
Okay.
people really usually didn't, and the other thing is that in that circumstance, which was the bulk of the time the human beings have been on Earth until, say, mid-20th century, basically, if you were fat, everybody thought you were rich.
Yeah, because you had the ability to
eat all the time. And it was a mark of being, that's why Rubens had his, quotes, Rubenesque women that were very, very curvaceous, but very roly,
yes.
poly.
Okay.
And it was a mark in society of being an upper-class person. And now, unfortunately, it's become just the opposite. It's really now a mark of being a lower class person, because what happens is that because you're in a socioeconomically deprived area, if you do not have enough money, if you are at the very bottom of the rung, yes, you are going to be skinny and starving. But for the most part, what happens is people in that class tend to... They don't have a lot of things to entertain themselves. They can't afford to do anything else. They watch TV and they eat.
Yeah.
And they eat and they eat. And they can't buy fresh fruits and vegetables because it's not available. And so they eat junk food, high calorie, very calorie dense.
Because it's cheaper and you get more of it, right?
That's right. Yeah. And because there's the fear of not having enough food in that situation, which overwhelms everything. But the emotional eating is you're depressed, you eat. And if you do that, your kids will follow your habits to the T. If you say you hate tomatoes, your kid is going to hate tomatoes. If you say you love chocolate, your kid is going to love chocolate. and that's it. They use you as their cue as to how to behave. They model their behaviors on what you do. And if they see that every time you get upset, you go and grab a pint of ice cream from the refrigerator or the freezer, then that's what they're going to do. So you've got to be careful about this. Yes, there is a genetic influence as well. But the reality is, in this case, it's nurture that way overcomes nature. And so you got to watch it because your kids will end up. I have kids now that I've been in practice 38 years, and I now have kids in my practice in their teens and even in school age years, 5, 6, 7, who are grossly obese and who are already having adult onset type, juvenile onset diabetes.
Grief.
They have diabetes, they have high cholesterol, they have humongous amounts of insulin hanging around, their livers are fatty, and we are talking about, and their inflammation markers are up the scale and up the roof. And these kids literally do ache when they try to move around because the fat causes inflammation. So we are talking about a serious, serious health problem. If these kids continue on this trajectory, they'll all be dead in their mid-30s or earlier.
Yeah, well, I think I saw a documentary that said it's possible that the life expectancy of, like, the generation after us could have a lower life expectancy, which is
I
the
think
first
it's not
time
only
because of obesity.
That is exactly correct.
Yeah.
I think it's not only possible, it's probable unless we do some changes
Yeah.
big time.
So so in terms of, so your kids don't pick up on this, what would you suggest if somebody's, because, being upset is close to, unavoidable. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And getting emotional is unavoidable unless you're a robot. But what would you suggest for people to?
The best thing to do, believe it or not, and it's a tough habit to get into, is to exercise. First of all, if you exercise routinely every day, your endorphin level stays up and you will be in a better emotional state overall. That's number one. That's one of the best ways to combat emotional overeating. The next thing is that when you do get really upset, have something that you're going to reward yourself with that isn't food. Have it pre-organized in your mind. For example, if you love to listen to certain music, the minute you get upset, you put on the upbeat music that changes your mood.
That's good.
All these different things. There are multiple different ways of rewarding yourself or pulling yourself out of a funk. One of the things that is standard is if you're really upset and you're angry and you're screaming and shouting, you stop and you say, I have to take a walk. And you literally pick up, walk out of the house, walk around the block, and when you come back in, you're calmer.
Yeah.
And that, these are a lot of ways that you can do, or for example, some people love to draw or paint. If you're getting really emotionally upset, you reward yourself with a painting. You're going to sit down and write something, or to write something, or to play an instrument.
Whatever you release is, it's not going to be the same for everybody.
That is exactly
yeah,
correct.
But
find something other than food to reward yourself with and to pull yourself out of a depressed state.
Yeah. All right. We got another big one. We got a big one coming up next. We're going to take a break. Another bad habit. We're talking bad habits, and parents are role models, and they need to remember that. And monkey see, monkey do is what we.
That
what
is
we say,
absolutely correct.
Right. Okay. And we're going to talk more habits coming up next. This is the Prima Pediatrics Healthcare Hour on AM 1220 KHTS.